So I'm from South Africa. I came to Norway that makes me very old, nearly 40 years ago as a refugee. Now that is unusual. People look at me and say, no. And that says a lot about the current situation. But I came as a bona fide, genuine refugee. So that was my start in this country. And I couldn't go back until there was a regime change, a system shift in, I think it was 1994. That's a bit of my story. And after that, I've been back often until COVID arrived, right? And I suppose we all share that also, being a lot of us at least in a foreign country, the trauma and the drama. I was just sharing with somebody today about the fear, you know, when you I just climbed on a plane and jumped off in Cape Town. Not anymore. The fear and the worry, and have I done this, and should I do that, and what happens when I transit in Doha, and all the rest of it. It's going to take a while before we're back to usual, back to normal. And that's really important because that impacts families. And it impacts families in foreign countries. How many of you are foreigners? Are there any Norwegians here? You're Norwegian. Okay. Married to a foreigner. So and that could even be harder, and I can explain why. But we're sitting in a foreign country and trying to cope with this, right? And you don't necessarily have the understanding of the population of Norway for what's going on in your family, right? It can be that you have relatives that are ill, even relatives that have passed away. And so it's a huge, something like this happens, it's a huge pressure, it's a huge disruption, you could say, of family life. Because when you are under pressure, when you are worried and when you are concerned, you react differently, you're not yourself. So you can snap, you can be irritated, you can want to sleep a lot, but your partner has problems trying to cope with you because this is not the person that I married, that I moved together with, right? And so we've noticed at the family office that there's been a huge wave of people needing to talk to us straight after. We thought it would come straight away, it didn't. It took a while. So we started in 2020? Excuse me, at the end of 2021, just about November last year. Suddenly, things started heating up. Family counselling is a very interesting. I'm representing the Family Counselling Agency, it's called in English. Familievernkontoret. Family Counselling Agency or Family Counselling Office, even better, of Rogaland South. That would be Stavanger, is the main office, just opposite the law courts in Stavanger. In Bergelandsgata, you've got Petri Kirke, just 50 meters down the road, our office and the law courts. Then we've got an office in the Hei block in the high-rise building. High-rise is relative in Brune, on the second floor, I think, of Lund, or third floor of that high-rise. So it's easy to get there by train. It's literally 50 meters from the station. And then we've got another office at Egersund, right? In the whole country, there's about 35 offices, half of which are private and half of which are government. There is no difference in what we do. There is no difference in the way in which we market ourselves, right? The difference is organizational, that is that, we're all fully financed by the government. The government pays for everything. So although I'm working in this private institute, I'm a government employee. The reason why that is that in this country we have a tradition where right at the beginning of new services, for example, family counselling, the church often starts. It's often the church, or was often the church, is still often the church, in fact, that initiates these services, right? And the church initiated this service back in the 50s. And then what happens in this country, it's quite a good tradition, and I think it's a very constructive tradition, is once the church has established this, then the government comes in and the government takes over. And part of the cultural understanding in Norway is services such as this should be government financed. It's the government's responsibility, not the private sector's responsibility. So we private, fully financed by the state. And wherever you are in the country, there won't be a family counselling office too far from you. You can find on the map that there's, if you Google Familievernkontor, you'll go to a web page and there's a map and you can see exactly where the closest office is. We are directly under BLD, the department that is Barne Likestilling Departementet. Now it's called Barne- or Familiedepartementet, the Child and Family Department or Ministry it is in Oslo. And then they have a directorate in Oslo, BUFDIR, Barne- og Ungdomsfamiliedirektoratet, and that is divided into regions, like the whole health system. So we belong to West, and our head office, administrative head office, is in Bergen. We don't have much to do with them, except that they send us all the money from Oslo to Bergen and to us. Yeah. It's an extraordinary system. I came from the UN to work here. I have to say it's quite interesting. A lot of us are foreigners, and I was so proud I was the director, and I was so proud the first year because I saved so much money. And these people came and said they want it back. And I said, you can't have it back, we've saved it. No. In Norwegian government services, you never save. If you do save, it has to get sent back to the government. So I learned, do not save. We're talking about that today, and that means towards the end of the year, everybody goes ballistic and buys furniture and horses and everything to get rid of the money quickly. Yeah. It's quite an extraordinary system and very different to what I was used to. We're a free service, that's really important. It costs nothing to come to us, and it is it varies at the moment, it's about 6 weeks, but usually between 3 and 6 weeks waiting list to come to us. And the other good thing is you do not need a doctor's referral. You pick up the phone and ring us. Right? You'll meet our staff, our office staff, and they will then ask you a bit about what the situation is. That's because they're writing in the case so that we know something of what's going to happen, right? And we need to do that because we need to have the right person on the case. If it's trauma and something terrible's happened and crisis, and I'll probably have it, but it could also be violence, it could be high conflict, in which case we want 2 therapists working with the couple or the family. So that's why they ask. You can reserve and you can say, I'd rather not say anything, and that would be okay. But it's always exciting when that happens because I never know who's waiting for me in the waiting room. But that's all right. You don't have to, but it's helpful if we can ask for a few keywords of what's going on, whether it's communication or whatever. I wanted to say also that along the way I'm going to be asking, and I want you to ask questions and also to comment. As I understand it, this is quite, it's not entirely unique, but it's quite seldom, it's quite rare is the right word, that a country offers this. Is that your impression you come from all over the world? There are not many countries that offer a free service. I know the United Kingdom does, but it's not free. United States, I would think also, I know the United States and Canada because we have colleagues there in Vancouver. Any comments so far? Thoughts? So what I was going to do is just tell a bit, and then I was going to draw and explain how we can think of families. And then I see also some of you have sent in questions which I could answer if there's any, if people want me to. Working at the office is a very, it's a very prestigious place to work. So we have very highly qualified staff. It's a clinic, and it's a very exciting place to work. Lots of courses, lots of development, lots of professional development. We have psychologists, we have specialists in psychology like myself, we have clinical social workers, so everybody's got a master's at least, right? Child welfare workers, that would be barnevern pedagoog, is that child welfare worker? Yeah, zo'n circa. Sexologists, I'm very proud, I was the one who got 2 of our staff to become, to take the masters in sexology. We have admin staff, really important, our dashboard. They are, without them the whole place collapses very quickly. We're quite excited because all the administrative staff are off next week on a course. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be an exciting week. Language-wise, we have staff that talk Norwegian, Danish, French, Arabic, and English. If you want to do it in your own language, if you want to talk to us in your own language, sometimes it's not so much about language, but it's about where your feelings are, right? So I noticed when I started as a psychologist here, it took a long time for my feelings to transfer or to be incorporated in Norwegian. So Norwegian was very, very technical. So I could talk about sorg, grief, but it didn't mean anything. I knew it was a word, but it didn't resonate, as it were. So it took about 2 years, in fact, before my feelings were able to be expressed and felt in a foreign language. Yeah. So we have interpreters, and if we don't have interpreters, we'll find interpreters free of charge. We usually do the interpreters by telephone, and that's because the country is so tiny that if we have interpreters physically present, the chances that you might know them are quite high, right? And so, I mean, if you're speaking Italian and there's an Italian interpreter, I would imagine the Italian community in Stavanger is not that big, right? I don't know. So you possibly might know the interpreter, and that could be a bit tricky. Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question. With the situation in Ukraine, for example, how pliable is the agency in addressing like a current uptick in people talking about their issues with war coming from Ukraine, Bangladesh?
So right now we're waiting, but one of the things that really we're good at is adapting very quickly. So, for example, in the 22nd of July terror attacks in Oslo, that was on an island, right, when all these young kids were killed. And in Oslo, we were there on the same evening, on the same day, at night, already open, right? So we can adapt very quickly. Here we've been told to wait. And the reason why we're doing that is it's quite chaotic. We don't know where they're living and quite what's going on at the moment. And it's taking a while. So I have to say it's quite fascinating to watch, and I'm not quite sure what the problem is, but I understand that it's been difficult. Yeah, and I think that has got to do with the Norwegian need for control. I've got to be a bit careful because there's a Norwegian sitting here. We must have control, right? Poland gave that up straight away, right? You've got 2-something million people in, there's no ways you can have control, so we'll build it on trust. This system doesn't build on trust, really. It's control. They have to be to watch you, and that's because you're using public money, right? And so they have so there's been all sorts of issues, which is going to make it difficult. And I've been on the case, and we are on the case, and keeping an eye on it. But right now, we're not involved at all. Any other questions? So far? Yeah.
Question. It says that there's a 3 to 4 week waiting list.
Yes.
What happens when there's an emergency case? Are they prioritized differently? Is 3 weeks for an emergency?
That's not going to work. That's not going to work. And it's so interesting you ask. This is a discussion with us. My own personal feeling is that it's our responsibility, because in the law it says that we are supposed to be working with families in crisis. So my office where I worked in Trondheim, they can't take people straight away, but they've got groups, crisis groups. So you're given the choice of if you want to get help from us who join the crisis group, and they're really, really good and very popular. And then you wait about a day or two before you're in a group, right? With us, it's going to be difficult. We could possibly do a week, but even that's difficult. So what we do is refer to the municipal crisis team. So each municipality has a team working. I don't like that solution because it means you're passing the family on. The crisis team will work with the family for a week or two, and just as you're getting to know the people who are working with you, you pass it on to the family office, right? And we all start again. But that's the way it is here in Stavanger, at least, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of time that you work with people, or is it just based on need? Like, you know,
based on need.
Based on need. So
Based
it could
on
go
need.
on for
Right.
years if necessary?
Not years, no.
Okay.
That would be pushing it, I would say possibly a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it has to be resolved within a reasonable amount of time?
Yeah, and we work very efficiently. It's unusual for couples to go for such a long time individually, but we don't do individual. I'll come back to that.
Okay.
But we do only couples and families. We do relational, and usually it would be very unusual for somebody to be going through a couple for a whole year.
Okay.
Usually there's a colleague in Canada, I can't remember his name, and he does a lot of outcome studies, and he says usually if things haven't changed within a month or two, they're not going to change.
Yeah.
So you've got to, yeah, so you work quickly. Yeah. Question? Who can use our services? Anyone can use our services, right? So if you're in the country, you can use our service and you can access our services. That's really important. We also have a really important profile in terms of being inclusive. So it's a bit difficult when it comes, I'll come back to that, to mediation, because we always ask the question, are you married or are you just living together? It means nothing, but it does mean something in terms of the process you have to go through if you are going to be separating. That's why we ask, right? But we're really not interested in whether you're married or whether you're living together, whether you are a same-sex couple or whether you are a straight couple, or whether how you identify yourself. Is not a problem for us. We take everybody, all different cultures, languages, ethnicities, and so on, right? That being said, there's a reason why I'm here, and that is that there's a huge group that we don't have contact with. And who do you think that is? It's the expat community. There's just about no contact with the expat community. So expats are significantly underrepresented at the office. Why would that be?
You move too much.
Move too much. Just don't know. I've been a bit worried because it's a scary Norwegian word called barnevern, child welfare. And we are not child welfare. We belong to the same directorate, right? But we've had some really shocking experiences with Stavanger child welfare and different nationalities, which have shocked people, right? Child welfare is well known. Norwegian child welfare is really well known. The BBC has written a lot about it. There was a huge blow-up between the government of Norway and the government of India, and not least Poland. So I'm wondering if there's some fear that, you know, we start as a couple and before you know it, suddenly child welfare is involved. And that would be a concern of people. It doesn't work like that, but still, I think that is something that is a concern. Yeah, is what I guess.
I know that to be true because I know people that have declined taking positions here because of child
welfare.
Yes, because of stories they've heard.
Yes.
They may be unfounded, some
Yes.
of them, but it's true. I know they've declined their jobs.
Yes. Yeah. So I think this is a huge concern amongst many expats in Norway, and you can ask whether it is founded, whether there's any reason to be concerned or not. But certainly there's been some really unfortunate, if you could say it like that, experiences that have been written up in the paper, the international press, and so on and so forth. Governments involved, and so on. But anybody is welcome to our office, and that is really important, and that's very important to stress. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, how rich you are, how poor you are, what kind of education you've got, you are welcome and you will be. We're very good at making people feel welcome. That's really important. Then we go over to what do we do? What do you think we do?
Counseling?
Counselling. Is counselling the same as therapy?
Sounds like a trick question.
It sounds like a trick question. It's difficult, you know. In the UN, when I was working in the United Nations, we didn't do therapy, but what we did was therapeutic, right? In that it was healing. We were hoping, at least, that it would be healing. I was working in the War Crimes Tribunal. I would say we call counselling office, but a lot of what we do is therapy, and I'm a psychologist. A lot of what psychologists do is therapy. So I would say yes, we do counselling, and we do therapy. Counselling would be a sort of more lighter version, I tend to think. So if we work in counselling, would be giving advice and helping a bit with communication. Therapy would be making changes in the person, right? Therapeutic. So it would be and intra psychology, right? So the internal psychology, working with how you think and helping you to change, right? And so it's not something we think of, but I think we're working on both levels all the time. We're working with couples and what happens between the couples, and the counselling and helping couples there and then in the office, and we're also working internally with persons. And that could be because if you've grown up in a family, for example, where there's been a lot of violence, that is going to be affecting your relationship, right? But also there's something in you that is broken, or something in you that we need to talk about, right? Do you get it? And so we'd be working with both. And we never know, because you guys ring in, so we never know. We don't get a full report on what's going on. So we sort of find out as we go along how we do this, right? And the main thing is that we work with relationships, so relational psychology. Whether that is couples, whether that is families, it's relations we work with. So when one rings in, if one says, I want to come alone, you probably hear, no, you can't come alone, because we work with relations, or relational, in relationships, right? In families, in couples. That is the focus. Yeah.
Does it include between parents and children?
Yes.
As well? So you could come as a parent and a child.
You can come as a parent and as a child, and you can come as a whole family. I'll come back to that, because we don't do problems related to children. That wouldn't be relational again, right? So if you're working with a child who has serious issues, it could be related to school, or it could be related to sleeping problems, fear of the dark, and that sort of thing. We don't do, because again, that's in the child. That would then be referred to the family clinic. It's all very confusing. A family clinic or to BIP. BIP is child psychiatry. Yeah. What do we work with when it comes to the therapy? We work with high conflict couples. So that is a major area that family counselling is working with. And violence at home, domestic violence. We work with communication problems, intimacy issues. That would not only be with regards to sex, but would also be with regards to closeness, coming close together, being close together. Betrayal or lack of trust. Anger management. Cultural issues in cross-cultural couples. Illness in the family. Especially, for example, if children are very ill, if there's a child in the family that is seriously ill, and how that impacts on the family. Financial issues also are a huge problem. So when COVID struck and everybody lost their jobs, that was a huge impact on families, right? Again, causing worry and concern that affects you, and how you react, how that impacts you, also will affect your relationship. Drugs and alcohol dependence come to us, and we usually send on to something called Rogaland R Center. Rogaland R Center is a huge, also like us, a private government, fully financed government institution that does a lot of work with alcohol and drugs. But sometimes people come to us, and instead of turning them away, we'll start the work and help them with, because you have to be referred by a doctor, so we can help them with the referral to the Rogaland R Center. Okay, and sometimes we don't know. Sometimes couples come to us, and it emerges later on that there's a drug problem or an alcohol problem. Also, expat families. I said we don't have a lot of contact with expat families, but we do have contact with expat families. It's difficult, and there are different constellations. Sometimes it's quite interesting. Sometimes if you are a mixed family, meaning that one of you is Norwegian and one of you is foreign, the impact of a separation on the foreigner is huge. Because your door into the Norwegian society is your Norwegian partner, right? And so when the relationship breaks up, you suddenly lose all the contact you have with Norwegian society, right, is what people tell us. And so that can be very, very difficult. If you are two foreigners in Norway and things start getting difficult, usually you would go to your family, you would talk to your parents, friends and so on at home. We deal with this very, very specifically in different countries, right? Italy is a good example. Are there any Italians here? Italy is a fascinating example. They've got a whole lot of research. They've called it the Milano Group, or Milan in English, the Milan Group, working with families, because there you pull in everybody when there's a problem. Income, aunties and uncles and grandparents and the whole shebang. Norwegians would not do that. Absolutely not, right? And so the way we deal with this is different, and when this happens in a foreign country, when you are struggling in a foreign country, it can become a very, very lonely affair. because the only contact you have is you feel that can understand you and is on the same page as you is often your home country. And so it concerns me that, and I would like that we had more contact with the expat community. And one of the things I wanted to ask this evening, because is Melanie still here? No, Melanie's mum's just arrived, so she had to leave. Yeah.
3 years.
Yeah, but the one of the things I'd like is how can we build on? How can we move on? Are there needs? Are there things we can do? We can talk about that a bit later. To assist the expat community, and it certainly doesn't have to be only with problems. It can also be about enriching relationships, deepening relationships to people. So we also do a lot of work with parental cooperation. That is a very, very important task. That is that when parents have left each other, when they've separated, they need to work together. And that is often challenging for parents, right? I have to say, it impresses me what parents can do for the love of their children. It really is impressive. You want to know how mothers and fathers love their children? See them at our office and how they're struggling to keep children in focus, even though they are struggling so badly. But we need to help parents to work together. We talk about, because the status in your relationship changes so that you're no longer a couple, the family doesn't dissolve. The family is still very much intact. There's still a mother, a father, and children, right? Or a mother and a mother, or a father and father, however you like to look at it. But the family is still intact, and so the family still needs to function. And our job is to help that family to function, right? I see with my experience that a lot of that has to do with how the couple break up, right? So, for example, if there is a third person involved in the relationship, that one person in the couple has been unfaithful and broken the trust of somebody, that often makes cooperation difficult. Yeah. Questions? Yes.
What happened in that case if one parent is not ready? So what happens?
What happens when parents are not cooperating?
Only one parent wants to do mediation, but the other person is not cooperating. Hugely problematic. I'm so glad you asked that question. What happens if one of the parents wants to cooperate and the other is absolutely not interested? Is that the question? And that's often the case. It's very seldom. It's very, very seldom that I say to a couple when they come to me, so who wants to break up here? And they both go, yeah. Yeah. It's very, very seldom. Usually there's somebody in floods of tears. It's an absolute heartbreaker. You have to know, Norwegians, when they were asked to range the different disasters that can happen to you, breaking up was at the top. Norwegians say that breaking up is worse than losing a family member. So this is serious, And I say that because a lot of people say, everybody, a lot of people break up. What's the issue? Half the population have experienced that. It can be a terribly, terribly demanding situation, right? You looked uncertain. Yeah.
Oh, no, I was just wondering what the percentage of breakup or divorces in Norway compared to other countries.
I'll come back to that.
Yes.
So trying to cooperate, we have to try and engage both parts, but it's not easy, right? If somebody doesn't want to cooperate, well, firstly, they don't have to. We can't force, we have no ways of forcing people to come to us. So the first sign of that somebody doesn't want to cooperate is that they won't come to us, right? And they don't have to come. So we'll send a message, that your partner would like to meet you at the family counselling office, and they mount my pitch. And we can't do anything with that, right? That's the one version. The other version is the person who feels that you've left them, and because you've left them, you are now going to suffer, and I will make you suffer. And one of the ways you make people suffer is dragging them through the courts again and again and again, ad infinitum. Firstly, you suffer economically because it costs a fortune. A court case with regards to divorce proceedings and child, what do you say in English?
Custody.
Custody is about 150,000 kroner each, right? So it's quite an expense, and if you keep on doing that once every year, it's going to be very expensive, right? So we can appeal to people, right? And we can appeal to couples, and to parents, but we can't do more than that. It is a problem. Yeah. Fortunately, as I said, I would say with couples where cooperation is really difficult because the one refuses to cooperate, would not be more than 15%. So the large majority of couples understand we've got to cooperate. I'm talking sort of after the 6 months. I think 6 months after a breakup, you're allowed to scream and shout and throw your toys. And then after that, you need to start calming down, right? And most people do. And that's really important because when we research, we see that children can cope with 6 months. More than that, the kids start suffering. 6 months of war is what I'm talking about, right? We did a very interesting study with thousands of children in Bergen and in Trondheim, comparing children. First, the clearest result was that all children would like mum and dad to live together, right? So very few children, if it's really been bad at home, very few, then some children might say, what a relief when mum and dad suddenly get it, and don't live together anymore. Very few children do that, right? And we see that when mum and dad can negotiate a separation on amicable terms, meaning that we can live together, we can live as a family, we can talk to each other, and we can tolerate the face of each other, that the children generally cope quite well, actually. The big problem is high conflict, and it's worse where mum and dad are living together. So, coming to you, so parents would say to me, we are fighting like cat and dog. We are really fighting, but for the sake of the children, we will not separate. That is completely wrong, because the children are suffering. So if you can't get it to work and there is a constant high conflict at home, shouting and screaming, it's going to affect the children. Yes, ma'am?
Just quickly, how would you define high conflict?
That's a very good question, and there's probably a formal definition of what high conflict is, but for me it's either volume or content. So, but that is relative. So when my old mother came to visit, she no longer alive, but when my old mum came to visit, she used to say that she thinks that Norwegians have a much higher volume when they get angry with their children, which is unusual. In South Africa, when I grew up, we didn't have a high volume. We said, on the contrary, it was quiet, and then you knew we were really in trouble, right? So in South Africa, you talk once, twice, 3 times, and you get whacked. That was then, right? That is highly illegal now, and certainly highly legal in Norway. So things are very different. So high conflict would be volume, screaming, but it would also be content. That is what you say, right? So when you are saying really awful things to your partner in front of your children, that is a very serious. For the children to witness that, we know it's very, very damaging.
Is there any kind of measurement of how much out of the day, or?
No. It's very interesting you ask, because which couple hasn't had a blow up, right? So, and I'm thinking, so it's okay. So if you've had a blow up, you've been living together for 5 years or 1 year, and you've had a serious blow up, you and your partner, does that mean you're a high conflict couple? No. You have to have, it has to be part of your communication style, and that definitely wouldn't be. But you've got a very good question. So would once a week, is that okay? Or not once a week, what about twice a week? Can we have a blow up every second week? But it's very interesting. Your question is very, very important. And a lot of this depends on your children, right? Because children are very different. But in terms of volume and content, that's really important, and of course physical contact. So as soon as it starts getting physical, that is really, really bad for the children. It causes a huge amount of fear. Questions? So we don't do work with children directly in child-related problems. There's something called helsestation, the health station. I don't know what would you call that in English, Melanie? Helsestation. It's like a health clinic for kiddies. So if you've got babies who've given birth, it's the place where you take them to get weighed, and the sisters poke them and look at them and to see if they're doing okay after they've been married. They also have a clinic, a family clinic, and that family clinic works with kiddies and discipline and boundaries and all that sort of stuff. And the other thing we don't,
I totally, you have that within your system, or is it something separate?
It's something separate. So this is, I'll get back to it because these words here, Norwegians have the propensity to confuse everybody. It's absolutely extraordinary. I said to them when I went to the United Nations and I was out of the country 5 years, that they made all these like legal terms. We'll get back to them. One is called dead fast bosted or fast bosted, and the thing is it has nothing to do with where you live, and it confuses everybody. Nobody understands anything, right? So we have a centre in Klubgata in Stavanger, just next to the cathedral, and 50 metres along the road, our office. And they work with different things, right? And they're almost exactly the same name. So we are used to saying to people, no, you must ring to them, right? And then, so we just have to keep on doing that. We don't do psychiatry with us. That's really important. And I'm very proud. Our office has been very it has been anti. Before it was anti. But we do not do psychiatry. We don't do medication. We don't do diagnoses. So there's no diagnostic system with us. That means we work with people who have diagnoses, of course. But we don't sit and diagnose people, right? And in a sense, not only our office, but family counselling internationally has had a very modern, liberal kind of functioning. We don't want to be associated with authoritarian systems that say, this is what you are, right? And because of this, you have to use this medication, right? That is our system. So we don't have, just to say our system, the actual computer system, you can't write in, there's no place for diagnoses, right? Then, what's the time? Thank you so much, Holly, for lending me your clock, your watch. 19:21. Shall we take a break at, say, 1:30? An hour and 10 minutes. Is that okay? Let's just talk about mediation. Mediation is a really important part. This is a very strange country. I'm on camera, so I've got to be careful what I say here. This is the only country in the world, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the only country in the world where you are not allowed to leave each other until you've come to us. Isn't that extraordinary? If you have children together. If you have children together, you are not allowed to say cheerio until you've been to us. There is no other country that does that. It doesn't matter whether it's quite funny, but it's very Norwegian. I really like its control. Don't you leave each other until you've been given permission to leave each other by the state. Whether you're married or whether you're living together. If you've got children, you must come to us. The whole system will stop up if you don't. Right? And that is in a sense, a really good system because we want to hear what's going to happen with the kids, right? Now, I can understand when you come to mediation and we start asking those questions and you come from a foreign country, you start getting anxious. Back to Barnavan. So what are they actually asking here? And what do I say? I don't understand Norwegians. I don't know what they think we should be doing, so I've got to tread very carefully here because I might say what we would do, for example, in the United States, and they would say, you're going to do what? And before you know it, right? So it is understandable that people are fearful. But we have a very, I would say, clear mandate in terms of contacting Barnavan, and it doesn't happen that often. Things have to be serious in order to contact Barnavan, right? But it happens. And we are obliged to. We don't have an option. With mediation, we want to hear what's going to happen. What are you guys going to do? And also what the status is, your legal status, which is really important if you're not married. I find that people really appreciate coming to us because they get a lot of really important information, right? So it happens, for example, that a couple will come to us and I'll say to the dad, so do you have common parental responsibility? Föräldraansvar. He says, no. Were you at the hospital when the child was born? No. He says, or I was. Did you sign the paper? I didn't sign any papers, right? It's terribly important that fathers have parental responsibility because without that there are no rights, right? So in effect, if the mother of your child is leaving you, she can adopt your child to the next partner and you can't do anything about it if you don't have parental responsibility. And parental responsibility anybody can get. All mothers have parental responsibility, of course, because they gave birth to the child, right? Parental responsibility is very important, and we go through these terms, right? Because there are these terms that are really important, which is felles föräldraansvar, right? You have to go to mediation. There are 3 different causes, either because you're breaking up, or because you're going to start legal proceedings. So you've been separated for 2 years and you've had enough of your partner's non-cooperation, so you're going to be changing the visitation routines. And he said, right, well then we're going to court. Before you start any court case with regards to children, you have to come to us to mediation. So it's separation, legal proceedings, and the other is if you're going to move. Okay, so if you have a child every second week and suddenly mum says, I'm moving to Bergen, you've got a bit of a problem. And in fact, mum's not allowed to move until the court the court proceedings are finished, right? Or she can, but she might be ordered back. So those are the three situations that mean you have to come to mediation. And when you've been to mediation, which is a lot of information you get, which is really helpful, and a lot of advice and help and so on and so forth, and you can ask a lot of questions, we also would like to meet the children, right? From 7 years old, one of the questions here, what rights do the children have? We often want to meet the children. What we do not ask the children is, so where do you want to live? And that is because it's not their responsibility, it's your responsibility, right? So we're much more concerned on how the kid's doing in this, how things going and what's happening and chatting to them, right? We also say to the children and we say to the parents that we would like to be able to, if the children say to us, I want to say something but I don't want them to know, that it's okay to hold that back. Legally it's not. Parents have the right to know everything the children say, but we ask, is it okay if the children say we want to say something, but we don't want the parents to know, is that alright that we keep back, right? Yes,
So from what age people are, say, in whether
12 years old.
Okay.
12 years old is when they can, when children have the right to be heard. And that's a very, very important thing. So that is with regards to the UN Child Convention. 12 years old is the important date. And from there, as they increase in age, they have a lot more to say. But look, it's a bit difficult. If you have an 11-year-old, or if you have two 11-year-olds because you've got twins, and they don't have the right to say where they want to go, but they are not going to be going to dad this week. I want to see the parent who can carry two 11-year-olds forcibly over to dad. It's not going to happen, right? And so somehow children have to be included, and we like to do it from when they're small, from when they're 7. Already hear what's going on and what they're up to and how, you know. And a lot of the advice I give to parents is when you're going to be looking for a new place to stay, involve the children in that, you know, so the kids come and see that, you know, where you're going to be living and what the rooms look like, and painting the new rooms and getting the place done up and so on and so forth. Okay? We're talking a lot about separation now. I hope it's not too much. It's only 30% of our work. 70% of our work is keeping people together, right? That's really important to emphasize. Are there any questions? Is this boring or is it interesting? Yeah. Yes.
If you have a couple that has like high conflict, but you know, some parents hide conflict from the child.
Yes.
But they feel that their relationship is at risk because they, for whatever reason, can't communicate well together.
Yeah.
Is that a case that's something that they could come to you with?
Yes.
Or okay.
Yeah. So there can be high conflict, and a lot of parents say, but we manage to, we don't think the children know about it, and so when we argue, they're often asleep, or we manage to shadow them, we manage to protect the children from the conflict. What do you think about that? I see Melanie saying no. No. So when parents tell us that, it often is wrong. 90% of the time the children are very well aware of the conflict because they know mum and dad well. So if they haven't heard it, they can see somebody is furious. And we all know that. We've all got parents, right? So I know my mother used to look at me in a special way, and that I would know, if you are going to be clever, my friend, silence. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Just a more general question. How much the Norwegian law is applying to the expat families which are married abroad and they coming here with their, you know, this signing of the papers for child? If we did it in the country, how Norway know it?
This is absolutely fascinating, right? So the law is that if you're here, then you can take out a separation here. Okay, so you take out a separation here. If you, for example, come from, let's take Moldova, for example, outside the EU, it doesn't mean that they registered that you separated if you were married in Moldova, right? So, or the United States for that matter. So it's complicated, but the usual law is, international law is that you separate in the country you're living in, but you need to inform and you need to send those papers to your home country, right? And so I had a couple come to me who were going to do mediation. How was this? They were going to do mediation with me so that they could get the certificate you get in mediation to give to the home country, because they were going to separate in the home country, not in Norway. That's not going to work. So the home country, whether it be England or Germany or France, would look at this Norwegian certificate and they'd say, this is not the way we do it. Okay. So if you want to separate in your home country, then you would have to be in your home country and do everything in your home country. But then you would also have to give Norway. It's very complicated. If you're living in Norway, you'd have to tell Norway that. And the Norwegians would be very confused. So I don't advise that. I advise to keep to the the international law saying, or the international understanding, and that's where you separate and divorce in the country you're in, and you inform the other country, right? Except, and again, we've got this thing with children, right? So even if your children are not Norwegian citizens, they fall under Norwegian law. Meaning that that the Barnevern would say, even if your children are Spanish citizens or Italian citizens, Barnevern, because they're children in Norway, Barnevern has the right to meet them and to meet the family and so on. Yeah. This causes a lot of issues. I don't know whether you heard on the news. Ukraine, with the war going on in Ukraine at the moment, they got a huge number of children they have to get out of the country, orphans, children in institutions, and none of them came to Norway. Why? Did you hear about that?
Right, or something like
Pardon?
that. Because they need the parents' right or something like that, or the legal right of the...
No, because the Ukrainian embassy in Oslo said you must guarantee, all countries must guarantee that when the war's over, the children will be sent back. And Norway said, but we can't guarantee that. Because if we find out that there's things going on with the Ukrainian children, we will hold them in Norway. And the Ukrainians said, no ways. Nope. Then we're not sending them to Norway. So it's a very different understanding of families. Right. Questions before we have a break? Discussion between.
It's interesting.
Yes.
Because if they're orphans,
Yes.
then they were being cared for by the state in Ukraine.
Yes.
Right? And then to get them out of that country of conflict,
Yeah.
come here, so they would rather not send them somewhere else than have them accidentally wind up having to stay in Norway forever. I think that's terrible.
Complicated. Very, very complicated. Yeah. Yes.
A lot of wives that I hear,
A lot of.
wives that I hear are kind of these training wives, as in the expat community.
Yes.
As in they're here and have residency only because of their husband's job.
Yes.
So if they were to separate, the wife would want to go back home with the children.
Yes.
That would have implications for the husband's job here. Or, because it's sure we live in different countries, how would,
Hugely.
Norway has a legal right for those children.
Hugely problematic, and it gets even worse. So you've got a husband working here, and the wife's here because he's working here. Say, for example, from Malaysia or Pakistan. Then they want to separate. And then the Norwegians say to the wife, but you're not living with him anymore, so you can't stay here. So she'll say, but my children are here. The Norwegians say, sorry. So when we have children, when we have foreign couples with us, I always check out, what is the status? What is your status? How long have you been in the country for?
What? That's one of your barriers for them to use your service.
Pardon?
I was wondering if that's one of the barriers to use your service.
Well, often people would come to our service, they would come to us for that because they want to know. So a woman would contact me. It doesn't have to be a woman, but often it is a wife or a woman in the relationship would contact me to want to ask, if I separate from my husband, what will happen to my residence permit? And that is, I think it's a 3-year cutoff, that below 3 years you're in trouble, after 3 years you're okay. And it causes a problem also in terms of dependency, right? Because she would possibly hang on longer than is good for her and for him, just because of the implications of separating, right?
But that's in many countries, that if you're kind of with your husband for visa reasons, and isn't a thing. You know that when you move overseas.
Yeah.
In the Middle East, if I lived in the Middle East, I could get divorced in the UK and it would be over.
Yes.
I would have a Sharia divorce as well, but it's just paperwork. But I would be legally divorced in the UK. So it's not just, here it's very stringent.
Yes. That's interesting you talk about Sharia, because just to mention that we've had a very close cooperation with some of the mosques in Stavanger and the imams. And the interesting thing with the Muslim faith is that we do not have the right to dissolve a marriage. That only the imam can do. Right, so we dissolve the legal. We can dissolve the legal binding, but the marriage is religious, right?
That's the same with the Catholic faith.
Possibly.
You are divorced for the society.
Yes.
The whole thing, and then unless the Pope says you're okay
yes.
to get divorced, you can't. That's why you can't remarry at the church.
For example, in Orthodox.
Also the Orthodox.
You have to go to the church to get divorced.
To get divorced.
Yeah.
So family.
It's way easier to get divorced.
Yes.
Just from the society
yes.
point of view than from get all the way to.
I'm very proud of our office. I have to say we need to have a break, but I'm very proud. We have been in the forefront often of what's happening in society, right? So back in the 50s, we were fighting when it came to the right to have an abortion, right? What they used to do here then, in the 50s in Norway, is that a young mother who wanted to have an abortion would meet a panel, and that panel was men. 5 men who would sit there and decide, and we have the logbooks. So we've got the logbooks from 1950, right? That time they used to say, Fröken so-and-so, Miss so-and-so wanted to, and then they'd write the notes, yes or no, and if she was granted or not, right? We were fighting that. We were up in front, and we've also, in terms of gay rights and LGBTQ+, we've been very much in the forefront, right? Yeah. So it's a very forward-thinking agency or office I'm working for. Let's have a break. So I was going to go and think. Very complicated. What are we now? 19? Yeah. Have a short break. No. Yeah. Yes. Is that all right? Yeah. Yes. Hello. Yes. Yes. Me?
But
I don't think people come here knowing this much detail about how things work.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, but still, I think, like, you know, like, if you have something, you'll still be scared to go, right? Because it's still involved. It's still not the safe,
Depending on the situation.
it's still not a safe place to discuss things. When it's really
Right.
I never used to do that. I mean, if you see your
Like it's a dangerous situation, right? If they're
you
going to
can
run
say
in
like,
front of the car.
where is it? Could be a serious problem.
I remember being in that programa, I was doing them on my own, and I was like,
And I asked my husband, and Aquarium was close. But I was talking about I have another Aquarium person, and I said, Aquarium was the one who wanted to work second. Okay. Because he planned everything. He worked for everything. I just I
just have to buy them.
I'm more into I'm more into the backpacks, and getting everything present. A little boring to start to check it out. Beside you, and he loved it. So he did that, and and he was like, yeah, I
My husband plans everything too. He's the fun. I'll plan with him more, and if she's back to asking him, what do you think about this, and what do you want to see, or do you have anything that needs to be included, but I usually just let him do it. I can't go there.
He would like up, down, really sit down. I feel like I'm pushing always. My husband is the one who's pushing. Also, I like to drive, and I like he likes to, but less than me. I all the time say, okay, I drive, like, okay, you plan it, and the bus comes off. Yeah, and I say, okay. I can make
Enjoying being here at school.
It was like a start of the book when we left from Spain. So for us, it didn't was sometimes I say it wasn't the best moment, but it was the moment we have to leave.
Yeah, right.
So we had to do that, and then very all the time you can say I'm to be here, like like a place side by side, whereas he likes to be around the kids. So
So she doesn't have a, she wants to be treated soon as they helping you.
that is great.
So it's about 1200.
She was traveling. And that is the part, he's very struggling. I mean, he has no experience or money, like any of these kids, a lot of everything. But the worst part is that is how why he got the life. Because he got like a 3 years old, was silent. And it's not like there are a lot, to know what for you.
Let's get started.
Say something emotionally, something like, we don't know, still we don't know. What is expecting, we don't know what is going on. But yeah, anyway.
Right, let's get started.
It has been amazing for me because I'm in Madrid, and here all the time it's very hard to take it home.
So I've been calling somebody Melanie all evening and she's Carol.
Many names.
I thought, what has she done to her accent? It was Australian.
And my hair color.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to just do a 15 minutes more. I just want to talk these technical terms. You have felles foreldreansvar. If you're married, you've got it. You don't have to worry. So anybody who's married in Norway, you've got it. If you want to check, you phone a skattekontor, a tax office, and you ask for the Folkeregister, which is the population register. And you give them your number, and they'll check and they'll say, oh, your daughter, she has, yeah, you've got felles. That means you both got, right? If you're not married, usually you also have. It depends how old you are. It sounds a bit awful, but they you know, now, firstly, most fathers are at the birth. If the father hasn't been at the birth, it's really important to check. Because at the birth they bring, well, not at the birth, after the birth, hopefully, they bring papers for everybody to sign and who belongs to what. Yeah. Who. Yeah. But it's very important to check, because if you don't have felles foreldreansvar, for example, if you don't have felles foreldreansvar and one of you passes away, it's not an automatic thing that the other will take over the children. Right? So it's very, very important. Yes, ma'am?
And as European citizens and or people who came here under a visa
Yes.
and have the number, registered number, does it also show that, or by automatically because we came as a family, mother, father, it's
not always automatic, I understand, especially if you came at different times. So check. Usually it's automatic, but I have registered with expats that some have said, especially when it came to checking for children's vaccine, they'd go on and they'd say, medication, there's no children. Where are my children?
That was my case.
That is your case.
It was not automatically,
No?
and then I asked the relocation agency to help me.
Yes.
And it took 3 months, and
Yes.
after that I got this information that I have
Yes.
to sign parental responsibility.
Exactly.
Me and my
Yes.
husband.
Yes. So it's actually very easy. You sign the paper, and I saw today, in fact, that you can do it digitally. And if both of you agree, it's done quickly. And if the partner doesn't agree, it's going to be done anyway, unless there has to be terribly serious reasons. If they're not going to give you parental responsibility. Okay. Then you have fast bostad. Fast bostad, meaning permanent place of residence. That's exactly what it's not. Well done, Norway. It's not about where you live. It is, before they used to call it daglig omsorg. That was much better. Who has the daily care responsibility of the children? This is when it's separated, right? Who is going to have the daily care? Are both of you going to have daily care? Or will one of you have the primary responsibility? That is, that the person who has the daily care responsibility, fast bostad, clothes, food, hygiene, homework, going to bed, all of that is your responsibility, right? And that can be shared, or the one person can have it, or both of you can have it. If you're a couple with children and the one person has fast bostad, daily responsibility, or daily care, it's really important that you have a tiny little contract where it says the child will not move from Stavanger or from Sandnes or whatever area you decide. Because in theory, the parent who has daily responsibility can move wherever they want to without your permission in Norway. So suddenly, if the mother has daily responsibility, she can say, I've got a new job in Bergen, Dad, so I'm moving. And he can say, I don't like it, and she can say, sorry. So very important to have a small contract where it says that we agree that a mother can move wherever she wants, dad can move wherever she wants, but the children stay here. Unless we agree differently, right? Are you with me? Then we have the actual physical contact, right? That can be anything from 20%, which is the smallest that dad would have or ma would have every second weekend, from Friday to Sunday. That would be 4. This is really important. If you didn't know it, NAV decides in Norway. Not the government, not the king, NAV decides. And NAV says overnighting is important. So NAV, when they're counting percent, they're not interested in hours, they're not interested in days, which is quite extraordinary because that's when the child is awake. They are interested in the number of overnightings. 20% means 20% of 30 overnightings a month, right? That would be 6 overnightings, okay? To 50-50, right? If you're going to do 50-50, you've got to be really good friends. Once you've separated, you don't have to be very good friends, but you're going to have quite a lot to do with each other, right? And preferably live quite close to each other. It becomes problematic if you want 50-50 and the one lives in Sandnes and the other one lives in Stavanger, because you keep on taking the child out of the area where the neighbours are and putting them here, and then the child's moving backwards and forwards the whole time. So preferably so that the child is in the same area no matter which parent they're with. Okay. We do teaching, we do a lot of supervision, we do a lot of public information like now, and we do courses and we do groups. I would very much like, where's Holly? To talk with your team about how can, are there particular things parents would like? Could we have a group, for example, could we have a group where we talk about parenting in a foreign country? For example, where we come together and we have some food like tonight. And food's always, food helps. Yeah. Tea and decaf coffee and talk about parenting in what is it like? What are the issues? How to help each other here, right? For example, that might be something, and we could do that. We're very keen on doing that. We could come out here and do it, or you guys could come to our office in Stavanger, whatever, and it's free. So I wanted to say, just in terms of families here, how we think of families. So I like to use a tilnærming, what is that? An approach called structural family therapy. It's quite old. It's by a guy called Salvador Minuchin. American, but originally from Argentina, I think. And structural family therapy I like to use because it's so, you can change it. It depends which culture you're in and how families look. So often I'm talking to refugees in the different municipalities and talking about our services, and they have very different family structures. And there's some important things. So if we take, for example, this is the way we draw it. Lizzie, are you quite sure this is not a permanent ink? Thank you. There we go. So, now, I don't want any man to be insulted. We draw men square, and a woman, for example, this can be a straight couple, right? And we have, say, 3 children. So let's say he is 40 and she is 38. And they have a son who is 15 and a daughter who is 13 and another son who is 9, for example. That could be a family, right? That would be a very traditional family, right? So already we start breaking boundaries when we start playing around, and some, because we have refugees from all over the world, some jaws drop when we, for example, I've got to be very careful of who I'm talking to, right? But okay, when we do that, for example, and they'll say there's something wrong there, and I'll say, no, actually it's quite right, you know. So a same-sex couple, right? Then you have Christian couples, or Christian families, and somewhere there's dad and mum, and there's also God. I'm not quite sure how to do that. And in some cultures, it would be God, and then it would be the father, and then it would be the mother, and then the children. And that's quite interesting in some cultures, because mum doesn't have any jurisdiction over the son, right? Mum has jurisdiction over the daughters. That would be very different. And so you can play around a bit, and the most important thing with these families are boundaries and groups. So each family has a group. And so the obvious group here would be this group. Okay, that's the mum and the dad group, the parent group. And he said, we're asking things and we're looking for things. For example, this often happens, I'm sorry to say, with mums and daughters. So you've got a daughter who's 17 and a mum, and we would be very interested if daughter's popping into mum's bedroom to borrow her shoes and to borrow her handbag and to borrow her clothes, right? Because that says something about the boundaries here. It's not wrong, but it's interesting, right? Also, if mum and dad are involving the children in things that some would say are inappropriate, right? Discussing their private problems, for example. And so these boundaries are really important, first to identify the groups, but you get different kinds of boundaries. You've got this boundary, which is a normal boundary. You've got this boundary, which is much too, it's a very thick boundary, it's impermeable. That means that nobody can come into this couple, and that's sometimes if the child has experienced something awful, you need to involve them, right? And bring them into, between mum and dad are working together with the little one, right? If he's going to be operated or he's been in a hospital or something, you know. And when that doesn't happen, because it's so, this is such a impermeable boundary, we've got problems. And then you've got the boundary that looks like this, right? And that is the boundary that is so loose that everything's a bit chaotic, right? We're never quite sure who's actually running the family here. Okay? Round the whole family, I just want to... oh, that made it even worse. That's what happens. Right. So around the family, you've got a boundary also, right? Now the interesting thing in Norway, traditionally in Norway in the old days, there was a very, very fixed boundary around families because they were so isolated. So I worked, for example, first in Uppland, Uppland Psychiatric, so I had to do with Gudbrandsdalen and Valdres valleys. I've got to tell you, there are all sorts of interesting things up there in these remote areas. But they, in the old days, there could be a farm, right? And there was nobody for miles. And so this family was very closed. Even today, there's still a tendency. The way Norwegians invite you home, it's different. It's not right, it's not wrong, but it's different to the way we would do it, right? And that's got to do with these boundaries. So I've often playfully said on expats, for example, I often wonder what happens at their cabins because you do not get invited to a Norwegian cabin. What do they do that is so secretive? But you don't, right? Well, I don't. Nobody's ever said, would you like to come with us to the cabin? It doesn't happen. With these boundaries, you could have lots of really problematic things happening inside. Common often, for example, incest. Now, incest, that is a sexual relationship between one of the parents and one of the children. Often it's a very thick boundary. Nobody has any idea of what's going on. Plus, that there's a real transgression here. For example, between mum and the son, right? There's something there that is not good. That's why I've drawn it in red, okay? So somehow, and that needs to be worked on. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask the extent of the influence of mothers-in-law, dads-in-law, extended family? Where do they come into the boundary?
So that's very interesting. And that causes, because we as expats, maybe I shouldn't say, Melanie's mum's just arrived. Now that's very common and very normal, right? Melanie's mum staying with Melanie for 2 weeks, but sometimes mum-in-laws can stay for 2 months, right? Or 3 months. And then mum-in-law has, or the parents-in-law are living in your house, right? And that can cause problems because of this, right? So you can go off to work, and the kids are at home now, it's holiday, so you're off to work, and you say to your mum, okay, so we'll be having lunch, I made lunch, it's in the fridge, and all the rest of it. And you come home, and the kids are absolutely ballistic. Why? Because Granny's been feeding them sugar all day, and you told her not to. But she says, I'm only here for 2 months, I'm not going to see you for another year and a half, I must be allowed to, right? So your kiddies have been eating cake and snoop all day long, right? Dad is absolutely livid, right? So Dad won't go to her because that's very impolite. Dad will go to you and you'll say, you must control your mother, right? And we have problems arising. The whole structure's challenged. And that is a problem because we have people coming to stay unless you have a very, very large house. You would do it differently if you were living in your home country, probably for shorter periods, or if you were living in the same city, you could pop in and see your parents and then come home again. So this is a serious issue. We also have common groups which are sort of okay. So for example, but again, cultural. So dad and son, and also this son later when he's older, dad and son will be sharing some things together, right? They'll be doing maybe soccer or football, and dad will be talking to the son about when he gets older, about the birds and the bees and women and this, that and everything else, like dads might do or might not do. This can also cause problems, right? My dad was doing that to me or my brother, and talking to me about women and about how I should treat women, and at that stage I wanted to say, but I'm not interested in women, I'm interested in men, so that was completely wrong. So that can also be very problematic, right? We assume things about ourselves and about families and about our children. And assumptions can be right and assumptions can be wrong. But this is also quite natural and quite okay, that dad and son will be talking, right? As will mum and daughter, right? I'm not sure, I've got to be a bit careful because I don't want to assume either, but in most cultures, when it comes to puberty and menstruation, daughters would probably talk to their mums, would they not? Not dad. And I don't know also with buying clothes for daughters, that wouldn't be dad that would do, or would it? Maybe?
On occasion.
No. There was a dad here that shook his head and said, absolutely not. He never said that, but his body said that. No, that would not work. We do not buy clothes for our daughters. No. And the daughters wouldn't want to. So working with this gives you an idea of how we think and how we work, or how we can think and how we can work when it comes to families, trying to work out how the family dynamics are and what's happening, right? And often when there are things happening in a family, high conflict, there's often issues here. When mum and dad are very different, the children suddenly have a choice, right? And it's even more difficult when mum and dad are not living together, right? And dad says that you should be home by 10 o'clock and mum says you can do it to midnight. So what's the child going to do, right? And you're going to have it go straight away. Any questions? That's about all I have to say tonight. We're just about finished, I think, with time-wise. 7 minutes over. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you ever follow up with families or families that you work with to see
how things have worked? Mm-hmm. I would love to. I always appreciate hugely when families meet me and say, you really helped and things really worked out well. I would love to, and I often say to families, could you come back? Come back and check in with us, When we're working with these agreements, these parental agreements between parents about kids and how the kids are going to be divided, often they do come back because they need to update the agreement as the child gets older. Right? So the agreement's different for a 4-year-old and a 14-year-old. So they often pop in and out. But even so, I would love to have parents come back and just check in and talk about, where we are and how things are working. But we don't have any formal follow-up. Yeah.
I just wanted to round it up by saying thank you, first of all, for all of you for coming out tonight on such a lovely sunny night.
Yes.
I think, and also the fact that we can have these community events again, I think is just so lovely. And I think it's the start of several other types of conversations that we can have, and all suggestions are welcome. This one came about from a discussion that we had at our ISS Wellbeing Committee, which has Holly and myself and Melanie as 3 of the members. And out of that, Melanie, with all her amazing contacts in the community, put this together. So thanks to you, but special thanks to Anthony for coming tonight and giving us all his wisdom and entertaining at the same time. And of course, Melanie's not here, but special thanks to her. And she's in the right place with her mum from Australia after 3 years. If you have any suggestions, of course, when we're at school and sometimes when we're talking to your children, and sometimes, we're trying to recommend and give advice to the student, or sometimes is it the family, does it involve the family, and sometimes trying to figure out which is the best place and where's the best place and which advice to give to families. It's helped us as well to clarify, we can't go here, but we can go here, and you can go here, and you can do that, and that's really helpful for us as well. So if you have any suggestions for future ones, it would be nice to start a kind of community event and start some conversations and give you support being expats in Norway. So thank you very much again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.